Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kenny and I'm here every single week to talk about movies. That's right, every single week. I don't miss a week. We are here this week, week number 4 of my 5 Fridays of October, where every week I reveal a new horror-themed top 5 countdown. So far I've done countdowns for my favorite family-friendly scary movies, my favorite horror franchises, and my favorite horror anthologies. If you missed those, go back and check them out. In fact, even if you've already seen them, go back and check them out. This week I'm counting down my top 5 favorite Stephen King horror movies. Yeah, only Stephen King horror. So no Shawshank Redemption, no Stand By Me, no Green Mile. You get the point. This countdown actually turned out to be pretty hard. You should all already know that I'm a huge Stephen King fan. So needless to say, a lot of his movies mean a lot to me. It was really hard to narrow this down to just 5 movies. And once I decided on the 5, it was even harder to try to put them in order. So for this top 5, I'm taking the easy way out and I'm just going to put them in alphabetical order.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Let's get on with my top 5 alphabetized Stephen King horror movies. Number 5, Cujo, the infamous giant killer Saint Bernard. In fact, what the heck were they thinking with a movie about some giant friendly Saint Bernard? Cujo has a relatively low kill count. I think Cujo just killed like 3 people. 2 of them happened to be an abusive husband and his like white trash best friend. So Cujo's kind of like a hero if you think about it. Seriously though, what makes this movie so terrifying is the attention to its characters. And in general, this is something Stephen King is best known for. His development of such nuanced characters. I'll be touching on Stephen King's character development a few times more throughout this video. In Cujo, the development of the main family is done so well, and each one kind of have their own desires and flaws, and every one of them become so relatable. The mother, the father, the son. So by the time anything happens to them, we just feel it that much more, and it's absolutely terrifying. And this is something that is typically left out of horror movies, character development. Usually a lot of characters are introduced fairly quickly in horror movies. That way we can just get more deaths by the end. But Cujo takes its time with just a few characters, making the suspense and horror just that much more effective. If you want to know more of my thoughts about Cujo, check out my video. Just keep in mind that this was my second video, so it's bad. Number 4, It. This one is a bit of a mess. There are 2 different adaptations. Each have their own 2 movies, so basically it's like 4 movies altogether. Most of the movies are great. I'd say both had a really great first part, but then the second part, I guess it's hard to really bring to film something that took Stephen King this long to write. I mean, look at this thing.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Any way you look at it, it absolutely needs to be on my countdown. I absolutely love this movie. Some more than others. The one that I find myself going back to and watching more often than the others is part 1 from the original miniseries. The storytelling in this one is the absolute best. I like how each of the characters are called one at a time back to Derry, and we get their memory of their encounter with Pennywise. There are a lot of characters in this movie, and this gives us a great introduction to each one without it feeling very overwhelming. It also shows them as an adult as well as a kid, which helps set up part 2. Going from part 1 to part 2 with this setup, it's not as jarring, and we don't really need a lot of setup or reintroduction of the characters, and it really speeds up the pace. That's not to say the original miniseries had a better part 2. No. I feel like the original miniseries captured the overall tone that Stephen King was going for. The scene with Stan, for instance, with the house calling to him, drawing him in. It reminds me of something from Pet Sematary or The Shining, how a place can kind of get in your head and lure you in. So overall, I feel like the tone of the original miniseries got closer to what I think King was going for in the book. That's not to say the remakes were bad. I really like the remakes. And in fact, one of my favorite scenes from the remake is also with Stan. After all the kids end up going into the sewer, Stan gets captured, and in that moment where it was just kind of caught, that was a really creepy scene that stuck with me for a really long time. Number 3, Misery. How could this movie not be on my list? The first thing we need to talk about are the characters. Again, Stephen King writes the best characters, and nothing showcases this more than a simple story with just a few characters that we really get to dive into and get to know. In this case, Annie Wilkes and Paul Sheldon. That's it. James Caan and Kathy Bates both did such a great job at breathing life into the characters Stephen King wrote. The pain and agony Paul Sheldon goes through while being held prisoner, I mean, you can just see it in his face. Him being overcome with fear while he pleads with Annie, begging her not to hurt him. Or when he's filled with rage when he finally loses it and cracks her over the head with that typewriter. And Kathy Bates, she absolutely nailed it. Her descent into madness was so convincing. I mean, from the highs and the lows and everywhere in between. Kathy Bates nails it and makes Annie Wilkes one of the most terrifying movie villains. Bottom line, James Caan and Kathy Bates both brought these characters to life so well. I know everybody always talks about the hobbling scene. By the way, if you think that's brutal, read the book. But the scene that always stuck with me was the one that came right before it, where Paul wakes up in his bed and sees Annie staring back at him. I mean, that is chilling. You want to freak me out? Just stand over my bed while I'm sleeping and wait for me to wake up. One more thing we got to talk about before we move on. I love how Annie named her pig Misery. And then in the end, Paul uses Annie's statue of a pig to kill her. Yeah, I know. She was killed by her own misery. Number 2, Pet Sematary. I reviewed the remake of this movie, and I gotta tell you, if this was the only version, if they had never made the original, this would not be on my list. This movie is awful. And the decision to kill off Ellie instead of Gage was just spineless. The character development was also damn near non-existent. Check out my review of the remake for more of my thoughts about the movie. The original 1989 version, however, holy cow. What I associate most with this book is the smell. I know it's weird, but hear me out. King wrote so vividly the rotting smell from the Indian burial ground. I smelled it when Judd first showed Lewis. I smelled the same kind of sour smell of dead when the cat came back. The smell, along with like the muggy air, it really stuck with me during reading and even after reading. I mean, it's a nasty book. Good, but nasty. And the movie did a great job at bringing the overall kind of grungy atmosphere to life. A lot of the dark, kind of gloomy scenes, I just, watching this reminded me of what the book smelled like. I know it's weird, but that's the best way I can describe it. The worst part of the movie, actually, I think might be the acting. I was never really convinced with the actor who played Lewis, and the girl who played Ellie was annoying. But all that can easily be forgiven by the two best performances in the entire movie. Judd and Gage. These two absolutely knocked it out of the park. I talked about this a little in my original video of the Pet Sematary remake. Judd Crandall in the original had a very commanding presence, and it was a needed presence because he was the one who introduced Lewis to the Indian burial grounds, and he's the one who confesses the power that the Indian burial grounds has over people to kind of draw you in. And Gage, oh my God, was absolutely phenomenal in this movie. I mean, this kid was just absolutely adorable and creepy, but adorable. Okay, before I get to my number 1, that technically isn't a number 1 because it's just in alphabetical order, I want to give some honorable mentions. The Mist. A group of people in a grocery store are trapped inside when mysterious creatures hiding in mist surrounds them. It sounds like a plot to just some typical monster movie, but it's actually a very character-driven story. We get to know all these folks from all over town, and we get to see how they interact and how they kind of form alliances with one another. It's got an amazing ending, and if you've never seen it, I won't spoil it for you, but I mean, the ending is, oh my God, crazy. Silver Bullet. This movie is just a guilty pleasure. A werewolf moves into a small town. The movie quickly becomes like a whodunit as we follow a young boy in a wheelchair who tries to figure out the killer. The boy's uncle is Gary Busey, and the scenes with him are pretty much worth it. He's exactly how you would expect him to be if he was your uncle. Anyway, definitely check it out. It's worth your time, but just be warned that this is probably the most campy movie on my list. Okay, number 1, The Shining. I can't lie to you. I only recently watched this movie. I mean, I had seen enough like bits and pieces of the movie to kind of know what it's about, but I read the book recently and decided to finally watch the movie. And you know what? I'm not sure why Stephen King hated it so much. The movie left out quite a bit, but I mean, no movie can include everything in a book that's almost 500 pages. The movie also changed a few things, especially the ending. Instead of Jack being killed off by an explosion, He just freezes to death. The movie also killed off Halloran. It also took away most of the development of Jack Torrance. Instead of a man remorseful for his past behavior getting infiltrated by the spirits in this hotel, we just get Jack Nicholson turning the crazy up to 11. Okay, maybe I see why Stephen King didn't like this version, but you know what? I do. I know I've just been talking up character development like it's the most important thing in the world, but in this case, not so much. I'm totally willing to sacrifice some depth of character for some shock value. I like Kubrick's watered down characters. It speeds up the pacing of the movie. The book was pretty slow, with long scenes of setup, lots of internal dialogue and dream sequences. Kubrick is already known for long, drawn-out scenes with visuals. We don't need additional downtime for character development. And speaking of visuals, I mean, have you seen this movie? Kubrick is no joke when it comes to movie making, and The Shining is no exception. I mean, this movie has got Stanley Kubrick written all over it. You can see his obsession with shot composition. Almost every single scene in this movie is so visually striking. Altogether, it makes for like the least Stephen King-like movie on the list, but I mean, that's okay. This movie is a classic for a reason. That's my list, everybody. I hope you liked it. If you didn't, that's fine. Just take to the comments down below and let me know what would be on your list. Now listen to me. It's very important that you subscribe. Next week is the last Friday of October. That means my last top 5 countdown is going to be revealed. If you subscribe, you'll be notified. That's it. Thanks for watching, and until next time, let's not just watch movies, let's talk about them too.